Hello and welcome to China Now, your window into the latest developments from China and beyond. My name is Makiza Latifa. Each week, we bring you breaking news, in-depth analysis, and stories that shape the world's second largest economy. From technology and trade to culture and geopolitics, we're grateful that you make it a point to join us every Saturday as we explore the key events and trends that are influencing China and the global stage. Let's commence with China Currents, where Lisa brings you weekly news reports on what's happening in China. The topics for discussion include China's issuance of 320 billion US dollars in bonds to improve people's livelihoods, China's conduct of a new round of exercises in the Taiwan Strait, and also China's announcement of a new sanction list targeting US arms companies, which includes 8 companies and 10 of their executives. We'll see how this sanction affects the USAF. Let's get started.
China Currents is a weekly news talk show from China to the world. We cover viral news about China every week and also give you the newest updates on China's cutting-edge technologies. Let's get started.
Welcome to China Currents, your weekly news report on what's happening in China. I'm Lisa. In this episode, China has issued a new sanction list on US armed companies, and the USAF will be significantly affected. China conducts a new round of exercise in the Taiwan Strait. China issued 320 billion US dollar in bonds to improve people's livelihoods. First, let's see how the USAF will be affected by China's sanctions. On the 10th of October, China announced a new sanction list targeting 8 US arms companies and 10 of their executives. These individuals will no longer be able to obtain any Chinese visas, including entry to Hong Kong and Macau. Their assets in China have been frozen and they are prohibited from engaging in any transaction or collaborations with companies or individuals in China. Why might it be a big problem for the US Air Force? Well, because David Sutton, Director of Asia Pacific at Lockheed Martin, is on the sanction list. For the US Air Force, Lockheed Martin's F-35 fighter jets are expected to be their primary stealth aircraft of the future. Over 1,000 have already been ordered, and eventually more than 3,000 will be supplied to the US and its allies. The F-35 was intended to be the next showcase product, following the F-22 to rival China's J-20 stealth fighter jets. However, internal reviews revealed that even the F-35's ability to fly was actually built on the covert use of Chinese-made parts. Now, with China's sanction, this practice can no longer be hidden. According to a 2022 report by Politico, the secret was uncovered by the Defense Contract Management Agency in August 2022. It discovered that Chinese-made parts were the magnets contained in the F-35's turbo machine pumps. Lockheed Martin spokesperson Laura Seibert said in an interview with the Warzone magazine that the turbo machine is part of the Integrated Power Package, the IPP, which is the primary component of the electric power and thermal management system. She explained that the IPP supplies electrical power to start the engine and provides conditioned bleed air for cooling aircraft systems. In other words, if this critical component fails, the F-35 could black out mid-flight and even fail to start. After the secret was revealed, the Pentagon's response was interesting. On the one hand, they seemingly couldn't accept that such a crucial component relied on Chinese manufacturing and immediately halted deliveries of the F-35. On the other hand, according to Politico, the Pentagon announced in October 2022 that the investigation had concluded and deliveries resumed, stating that the new batch of jets no longer contained Chinese-made parts. As for the aircraft already delivered with Chinese components, William LaPlante, the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment, signed a national security waiver, meaning the Defense Department would not replace the parts of those aircrafts. Now, by reviewing the F-35 crash archives in Air and Space Forces magazine, we can see that prior to October 2020, there were only 2 recorded incidents involving the F-35 in the US. However, since October 2020, there have been 7 additional incidents, with the failure rate tripling. The most recent F-35 crash occurred on May 28, 2024, at Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico. According to ABC, the pilot was flying the jet on behalf of the Defense Contract Management Agency. A Lockheed Martin spokesperson said the jet was being transferred from Fort Worth, Texas, where the company's F-35 factory is located, to Edwards Air Force Base, California, for modifications and testing. The stop at Kirtland was made to refuel. The aircraft encountered issues shortly after takeoff, specifically with the vertical takeoff and landing system. Air and Space Force magazine reported that the accident bears a few similarities to the crash of an F-35B at Lockheed Martin's facility in Fort Worth, Texas in December 2022. According to Wikipedia, this was the first time an issue with the vertical takeoff and landing system has been reported for the F-35. Fortunately, the pilot survived thanks to the ejection seat that was made in the UK. Now, regardless of whether the US Air Force regrets its decision to phase out Chinese-made parts, this sanction list launched by China will help them complete this process. Lockheed Martin will no longer be able to access its fund in China or directly procure any parts from the country. Moving forward, we may observe further changes in the reliability of F-35s delivered after October 2020. Of course, China doesn't intend to rely solely on sanctions to defend the country. On the 14th of October, the PLA conducted a joint military drill, codenamed Joint Sword 2024B in the Taiwan Strait, with vessels and aircraft approaching Taiwan Island from different directions. The drill came after a speech from the leader of the Taiwan authorities, saying that Taiwan is not subordinate to China and that Beijing does not have the right to represent Taiwan. Spokesperson of the PLA Eastern Theater Command, Li Xi, noted that the joint drill focused on subjects like sea-air combat readiness patrol, blockade on key ports and areas, assault on maritime and ground targets, as well as joint seizures of comprehensive superiority. He emphasized that the drill also serves as a stern warning to the separatists of Taiwan Island. Meanwhile, the China Coast Guard organized a fleet vessel to conduct law enforcement patrols and maritime control operations around Taiwan, including the waters near Dongying Island and Mazu Island, as part of a patrol encircling the island. In this operation, the China Coast Guard deployed 6 formations, which is double the size of the comprehensive law enforcement drills conducted on May 23rd. Notably, among the vessels deployed was the 10,000-ton ship numbered 2901, the largest vessel currently in the China Coast Guard fleet. Interestingly, the tonnage of this vessel has surpassed that of the US Navy's Ticonderoga-class cruisers and the Allied-class destroyers. Yet, it's just a Coast Guard ship, not even a warship. In response to the Mainland China's drill, the United States Department of State emphasized it remains committed to its long-standing One China policy in its official statement. In addition to the military, China has also taken steps to boost its economy. But on the 12th of October, China's Ministry of Finance announced that over the next 3 months, China will issue 2.3 trillion yuan in special bonds to alleviate local government's debt pressure and improve people's livelihood, which is roughly about $320 billion US. From January to September, China's public budget expenditure reached $280 billion, reflecting a 2% increase compared to the previous years. According to the official statistics from the Ministry of Finance, these funds were primarily allocated to several key areas. Social security and employment spending rose by 4.3%, education expenditure increased by 1.1%, and spending on agriculture, forestry and water climbed by 6.4%. Additionally, urban and rural community expenditure experienced a growth of 6.1%, while housing security spending grew by 2.5%. Housing security could be one of the most popular topics for Western media to hype the China collapse. Just last month, the New York Times report titled with "Why It's So Hard for China to Fix Its Ailing Economy" claimed that the danger is that the government could have fewer fiscal resources to deploy to keep things from unraveling. However, on the 12th, Liao Ming, Vice Minister of Finance of China, said that in the past 3 years, the central government had allocated about $7 billion to build 6.6 million indemnificatory apartments for Chinese citizens. In China, indemnificatory apartment refers to government-provided housing aimed at meeting the needs of low and middle-income families. Additionally, China has implemented a tax rebate policy encouraging people to trade their old homes for new ones. They've also reduced the interest rate on housing provident fund loans by 0.25 percentage points, which will save residents across the country a total of $2.8 billion in interest payments each year. And that is all for today. Thank you for watching this episode of China Current. If you have any thoughts or comments about our show, please reach us at the email address below. We look forward to hearing from you. See you next time.
Thank you, Lisa. We are grateful for the updates. Next on the show is Speak Softly with Charles Liu. In this episode, we'll highlight his submission at the 40th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and the United Arab Emirates to address the issue of green tech. Please stay with us for more details.
Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really honored to be here, especially on the occasion of the 40th anniversary of this establishment of diplomatic relations between China and the UAE, to address the issue of green tech. I'm honored also because less than a year ago, COP28 was held successfully here in the UAE, and that's where the leaders of the world and the elite in the sector came and gathered to address this critical issue, the issue which will impact the rest of the world for many, many decades to come. It will even involve whether or not the Earth will survive. Look at that chart. Even though 127 countries committed to improving their performance in carbon emissions, this is what we see. Continued deterioration of the situation. This is weather anomalies, and it's very, very dangerous where we're headed. And this is not just one country, because it's the whole Earth that's impacted. This is the weather anomaly chart. And this is the number of deaths chart. But this is the significant part too, for developing countries especially, the amount of money that is lost because of weather problems or climate issues. And it makes it very, very difficult for developing countries to continue to develop and improve their livelihood of their people if weather continues to take away from the wealth of the earth. Let me just start by talking about outlook for green technology. There are two sides to technology. One side is the demand side, one is the supply side. In terms of demand for energy, it's increasing all the time. And it's increasing, as you know very well, much faster than people had projected for a number of reasons. One major reason is developing countries need to grow. And to grow, you need to have electricity. That's on the demand side. On the supply side, there's an issue of whether or not new and renewable sources of green energy can continue to meet where the demand is. It's very, very difficult to meet the demand as it stands now, but to meet the demand that is forthcoming that is continuing to grow, some in astronomical growth levels, for example, which we will touch on later, on AI, for example. The demand on power will be incredible. So on the supply side of electricity, 40% are still by fuel, and still a significant portion is contributing to the impact on the CO2 emissions. Now, what has happened with new renewable sources of energy is that wind, solar are the biggest contributors to new and renewable deployment worldwide. And in this regard, there's good news because of what happened in China. Solar is now a significant portion of the energy supply in China. Over 37% now of China's energy is new and renewable, and the bulk of it is solar. This is a chart of solar making up 75% of new renewables worldwide. And China is a major contributor in this. You can see with this chart, the red being China, of course, in terms of contribution. And also in 2023, both wind and solar installations in China increased by 50%. So it's continuing to grow. What happened in the process that is significant is China, because of the market size, creates economies of scale and supply chain, allowing China to produce all the new and renewable equipment at a fraction of the cost of elsewhere. We have a situation in which the price of solar is now cheaper than coal, and the price of solar is now 90% reduction from what it was 10 years ago. So it becomes available to anyone and everyone. It is hoped that in China, by 2028, 60% of new energy supply requirements will be through new and renewables. You can see utility scale solar and wind power capacity of the top 10 countries. China is the majority, it's the bulk of it. So I think it's recognized by all that China has the capacity to produce this at a very cheap price so that it could be used by the rest of the world and contribute to reducing carbon emissions for everyone. This is what's happening with solar and wind. Wind is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. This propeller is 19 tons. And moving it about is not easy around mountains and so on. But it's the most efficient wind blade that exists now and is now widely used in China. So two things. One is it's getting bigger and bigger. The solar farms are getting bigger too. Solar farms are 1 gigawatt to start, and now they're talking about even more than that. Ladies and gentlemen, 1 gigawatt means 1.5 million panels. Think about what that means in terms of building, constructing, and maintaining. I have some stories to tell about that. That will be interesting. So they're getting bigger is one thing. The other thing is they're getting smarter. Internet of Things allows data to flow, and AI allows data to be analyzed and studied, and circumstances and situation to be analyzed like in never before ways. And then this is mixed energy. Wind turbines, especially offshore, have a problem in terms of transmitting it onto shore because it's pretty far off the shore. And the undersea cables are expensive and difficult to lay out. So what China has done is developed a combined system of wind and hydrogen. What you see there is something that could be moved about. It's a hydrogen generator without using fresh water. Using seawater can produce hydrogen cleanly. And then it becomes wind power converted to hydrogen. Wind power converted to hydrogen means that it could be stored and transported. This was actually successfully tested in July of this year. So we have new renewables getting bigger, smarter, and multifaceted, combination use of different technologies. I won't get into details on hydrogen energy because it's probably not going to be really significant within the near future. But there are a number of studies which indicated countries are beginning to look at hydrogen more seriously as a means of safe transport and storage. So potentially there could be about $500 billion worth of investment in about 5 to 7 years. But it could be seen as a really good transitory or intermediate term solution. Now this is the interesting one. Nuclear fusion. As you can see in the chart, that this is a test, laboratory test in Shanghai. And we're talking about 120 million degrees centigrade power being generated for over 400 seconds. Now the test has improved on previous records of 100 seconds, 150 seconds, and so on and so forth. Fusion is basically, I guess the only way to describe it is a mini sun on Earth. And this is ultimately going to be the most efficient, the cheapest, and probably the only true pollution-free generator of power. There is a lot of progress, but there are no clearly delineated scientific route to addressing the technological and engineering issues that have to be addressed. It will probably take another 10 years before this is all defined. So within the next 10 years, the other means are still more important. But scientifically, it's China and Europe which are most advanced in fusion technology development. Now I'd like to address a few green technologies plus key issues. For transition from fossil fuel to new and renewable sources of energy will lead to a lot of issues. Competition. We see the competition for fossil fuel, and we will see competition for minerals that's required for new and renewables. We'll see competition for supply chains for new and renewables. We'll see competition worldwide for control over the distribution and production of new and renewables. Ultimately, in this context, I think there are two issues that I think are significant that has to be addressed. That is fairness and justice. Developed countries have been developing for a long time, have been emitting CO2 for a long time, and has been polluting the air that is impacting the rest of the rest of the world for a long time. Now, you can see this from this chart, how much has been pumped into the air by the developing nations, and in recent years by China. This is one reason why China is working very hard on promoting new renewable sources of energy. This is figures for the top CO2 emitting countries from 1750 industrial revolutions begin and to 2021. G7 countries caused 44.6% of all human-caused CO2 emissions. And there is a responsibility of the developed countries to address this issue with nuclear power plants, with new renewables. So I think it's important in terms of fairness and justice and fairness for developing countries to receive support from the major developed countries in promoting new and renewable sources of energy that can help them develop and have sustainable development. Current climate funding is really insufficient. There have been a lot of commitments by developed countries. So I think this is something that should be brought to the attention to the rest of the world. And COP28 certainly has done that, and I think this will continue to happen. Again, sorry to talk about China so much, but China is very big in this sector. China is very big in this sector. In every aspect of new renewables, China is a leading player. And the reason is very simple, of course, because China's market size, its economies of scale, and the most important part is government focus, policy focus, and government drive toward improving their carbon emissions. I have some examples of how the Chinese government has done it. For those of you who might have gone to China 10 or 15 years ago, you will recall that Beijing was a city under a haze. Remember the concept of PM 2.5? The pollution that was in Beijing that was horrendous and hopeless? In 3 years, everything cleaned out. Skies were blue, and air was clean. How did they do it? Government commitment to do it, they did it. There are several ways. One is to change all coal-fire power plants to gas. That's one. Second is homes that were using coal for heating changed to gas. So for a while, there was shortage of gas in China, and a lot of LNG had to be imported. But when people get used to it, they think and they realize that it's a lot better to use gas. And the other part that was really good was that education. People were educated, were told about what caused this PM 2.5 pollution, and young people started to look out for cleaner solutions, and people started to do engineering studies on pollution reduction and pollution control. So I think education is a very significant portion of what goes into a society to move toward a greener future. This is a story that I want to tell that is now reality. We have a situation in which China is moving heavily into solar, and the solar power plants are getting bigger and bigger. As I mentioned before, 1 gigawatt is 1.5 million panels. Now, if you have panels, they have to be maintained. They have to be maintained how? To make sure that it doesn't crack, or there are cracks which have to be solved, and then the chips inside are still functioning properly, the wires inside are not broken. But for things which are sitting out in the air with water, rain, with sun, with sand possibly. Of course things will crack, things will go wrong. As my friend here knows, if one cracks seriously, the entire line stops producing. The whole row of panels stops producing. And that's very significant in terms of efficiency of production of electricity for solar panels. So in China, talk about ingenious solutions. They found a way of doing this without having to have people with a monitor checking one panel by one panel. 1.5 million panels takes a long time to check. They're using drones. And the drones will flash a near-infrared light on the panels and take a photo. And then using AI, they can decipher which panels are in what shape. Are they okay? And then immediately they can address the defunct panel, the panel that is having problems. So, in addition to new and renewable sources of energy, drones, AI, these are things that are all contributing to improved situation in the sector. I think this is something that really should be spread as broadly as possible worldwide, because from what I know, in the Middle East, the building of large-scale solar farms are more prevalent than micro-scale or distributed. And that means if you don't maintain them properly, then you're wasting your money. I prepared some other things on China, but I don't think I should talk about China much more. But the only thing that I would like to talk about in this context. Oh, this is an interesting slide. I forgot about this slide. Solar farms. This is in Ningxia province. It is a Gobi Desert. It is a desert condition. Because of the solar farm, wind supply, the amount of wind was reduced by 50%. So, as a result, grass started to grow. And grass, when dried up, becomes very dangerous to fire. So, what happens? They started raising sheep or goats to eat the grass. So now, this solar farm actually has 20,000 goats. So the farmers around are very, very happy that this is possible. I think there are a couple of things on the horizon which are significant. I think it's important to think about what China can do for the rest of the world in this context. I have a story to tell about that, speaking to a very senior OAU official. He talked about the growth of Africa in the last decade. And he said, Charles, we have to thank Shenzhen. I said, what? Thank Shenzhen. Why Shenzhen? He said, the last 10 years, Africa developed very quickly. One reason is because of the development of smartphones. Smartphones, meaning Huawei and ZTE building out the 4G network in Africa. And the suppliers of Shenzhen, because of their manufacturing capacity, was able to produce cell phones, smartphones, for $45 a piece for Africa. Now, why is that significant? Because the Africans, 90% of them didn't have bank accounts. They couldn't do financial transactions. But with smartphones, they were able to do financial transactions. They were able to do information flows and contacts and study more about the rest of the world. So he said, Shenzhen is able to do this, and it's been very helpful to Africa. And I'm hoping that in new and renewable sources of energy, same thing could happen. Same thing could happen where China's economies of scale and manufacturing prowess could help the rest of the world in the same way. I call this the Chinese way of bringing everybody in through abundance instead of keeping people out through scarcity. For UAE, I think UAE has abundance of capital, especially long-term capital, and UAE also has something which I think is really sorely needed in a lot of countries, that is a vision. Looking at what UAE has done in the sector of AI, which is something that we've been following very, very closely in China as well, it is definitely a country where the leadership has vision and is looking forward to innovation at the very tip of the pyramid. And I hope UAE can work with China in this context. You have deployable capital, but even more than that, your investments have given you a lot of IP rights. And these IP rights, if you leave it in the laboratories, it doesn't do very good, doesn't do very much good. But if it's combined with China's manufacturing prowess and its capacity to deliver to the rest of the world, I think will be very, very valuable. Thank you.
And that's all for today's edition of China Now. My name is Makiza Latifa, and I want to say thank you for joining us as we explore the stories shaping China and its impact on the world. Be sure to tune in next week for more insights and updates. Until then, stay informed and don't forget to share with us your comments, thoughts, feedback, and suggestions through the email provided below. Enjoy the rest of our programs.